Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. In today's video we are going to be doing my second reintroduction update of Washington Dulles International Airport. In the previous update we had a past update where we went through all of the airlines and aircraft that have now stopped operation at Washington Dulles. So in today's update we are going to be doing the opposite of that. We are going to be doing a futuristic airport update, where in this update we will have all the aircraft and airlines that have started or will be starting service to Washington Dulles very soon. This will probably be the last reintroduction update, so the next update we do of Washington Dulles will be a regularly scheduled time period set update where we go through morning, afternoon, evening, night updates with all the corresponding airlines that appear at Dulles at those times. So with that being said, we're going to start down here with Concourse B. And here we have our first aircraft, which is the Alaska Airbus A321neo. This aircraft is pretty rare at this point because, of course, Alaska want to be an all Boeing fleet, but after acquiring Virgin America in 2018, they, of course, brought on a bunch of A319s, A320s, and orders for A321neos, which Virgin America were going to buy. And, of course, all those aircraft were then passed on to Alaska, who want this all Boeing fleet. So, over the last few years, they've been phasing out their Airbus aircraft until they have again an all Boeing fleet. And this is the last of the Airbus aircraft remaining in the Alaska fleet. They've got rid of the A319, they got rid of the A320 pretty recently, and now they are on track to get rid of the A321neo. They haven't yet, they have 10 of these left in their fleet, which compared to the size of the Alaska fleet is a very finite amount of Airbus aircraft left, but these are going to leave the Alaska fleet in September 2023. So we have a few months left of A321 operations with Alaska. And at the moment, Alaska are operating the A321neo to Washington Dulles from both Los Angeles and San Francisco. So this Alaska A321neo is going to be heading out to San Francisco in California. Next up, moving over to American, here we have this American Eagle CRJ-700. This aircraft is going to be heading out to Charlotte in North Carolina. Of course, American usually use the CRJ-900s on this route. I don't have an American CRJ-900, so for today's update we're just going to be using this CRJ-700 instead. And then next up here we have this American mainline 737-800, and this aircraft is going to be heading out to Dallas-Fort Worth in Texas. And then next up here, finally for American, here we have this American Eagle Embraer 175. This aircraft is going to be heading out to Austin in Texas. Of course, before the Austin route started, you would have never seen an Embraer 175 here at Washington Dulles from American, but now they have started service on the Embraer 175 to Austin, which is pretty cool. So this Embraer 175 is going to be heading out to Austin in Texas. Moving around, here we have a very interesting Delta aircraft. Here we have an Airbus A220-100. This aircraft is going to be heading out to Seattle. Delta are using the A220 on the route between Washington Dulles and Seattle, but they are using the A220-300. I don't at the moment have an A220-300, so instead I'm using this A220-100, but it's pretty cool to see some diversity from Delta using the A220 on the Seattle route from Washington Dulles. And then next up here we have another interesting route that Delta operates. We have the Delta 737-800, and this aircraft is going to be heading out to Salt Lake City in Utah. And then next up here we have a Delta Connection Embraer 170. He is of course going to be heading out to Boston. Next up here for Southwest, here we have a Southwest Airlines Boeing 737 MAX 8. This aircraft is going to be heading out to Denver in Colorado. And then next up here for Southwest again, we have a Boeing 737-700. This aircraft is going to be heading out to Orlando in Florida. And then next up here we have the first of the new airlines which will be starting service to Washington Dulles. Here we have this WestJet Boeing 737-800. WestJet before this had no service to Washington DC whatsoever, not from Reagan, Baltimore or Dulles, but now we have this seasonal service from Washington Dulles to Calgary, which is pretty interesting. They're going to be starting this service on June 2nd, and as I said, this is going to be a seasonal seasonal service over to Calgary, which is pretty cool. And then next up here we have another Canadian aircraft, not a new airline but a new route starting to Washington Dulles. This Air Canada 737 MAX 8 is going to be heading out to Vancouver. This is pretty cool because of course before this Air Canada only had service to Toronto and Montreal. Toronto is on a seasonal mainline service, so this isn't the first time we've had Air Canada mainline here at Washington Dulles. During the summer, Air Canada fly mainline to Toronto, but then of course they fly all year round express service to Montreal and also Toronto. But of course this Vancouver service is going to be a pretty long flight in comparison to Toronto and Montreal, and this is going to be starting on June 1st of this year, which is really exciting. And then next up, moving on to the long list of London flights now. We have an insane amount of London flights from Washington Dulles nowadays. Of course, United operate 3 daily flights to London Heathrow, which is still a lot in itself, but we have 3 other airlines which now all serve Washington Dulles from London. Of course, the obvious one is British Airways. British Airways have been serving Washington Dulles for decades now, but British Airways are back on A380 service from London Heathrow to Washington Dulles, and they are on twice daily flights, which is pretty cool to see. After that, here we have a Virgin Atlantic 787-9. He is of course also going to be heading out to London Heathrow. Virgin Atlantic are on daily service to Washington Dulles, but what's interesting is they are now flying the 787-9 as opposed to the A330-300, which they flew to Washington Dulles before the pandemic. And then next up here, the fourth and final London-bound airline, we have Norse Atlantic. Norse are going to be starting service to Washington Dulles on June 1st of this year, and they are also going to be flying between Washington Dulles and London, but not London Heathrow. Norse are going to be flying from London Gatwick, which is pretty interesting because we haven't had a London Gatwick to Washington Dulles flight for a very, very long time. So this Norse 787-9 is going to be heading out to London Gatwick. Then next up here, moving around to the other side, here we have this Icelandair Boeing 737 MAX 8 in the old color scheme. He's of course going to be heading out to Reykjavik, Keflavik. Icelandair are currently using the MAX 9s to Washington Dulles, and I do currently have all of the Icelandair MAX 9s on order, and yes, I mean all, every single registration of the MAX 9s that Icelandair have in operation. I will have all of them in my collection so we can get some diversity with all those different liveries that they have. But yes, so I have this in here for the meantime, but once we get those MAX 9s, I will have those in Washington Dulles updates instead. And next up here we have the second Reykjavik Keflavik bound aircraft. Here we have the Play Airbus A320neo. Play recently started service here at Washington Dulles on board their A320neo, which is interesting because of course Play also serve Baltimore Thurgood, which is only about a 45-minute drive away from Washington Dulles. What's also worth noting is that Play are now using primarily the A320neo into Washington Dulles and the A321neo into Baltimore Thurgood, which of course is interesting because you would think that Dulles would be the more highly demanded airport, but apparently not. This could also be seen as Play kind of testing the waters here at Washington Dulles before they fully commit to sending the A321neo here, and also they don't have as many A321neos as they have A320neos in their fleet. So it will definitely be interesting to see how Play get along here at Washington Dulles, but this Play Airbus A320neo is going to be heading out to Reykjavik, Keflavik. After that, here we have another new airline. We have the Iberia Airbus A350-900. Iberia started service a couple of years ago now to Washington Dulles from Madrid. They are currently using the A330-200s, not the A350-900s. Hopefully they fly the A350s to Dulles soon, but for now it's the A330-200. I don't have either the -200 or -300 of the A330 from Iberia, so I'd love for a company like NG to release those, but in the meantime, this Iberia A350-900 is going to be heading out to Madrid in Spain. Then next up we have not a new airline but a new route. Here we have the Ethiopian Boeing 787-8, and this aircraft is going to be heading out to Lome in Togo. Along with the regularly scheduled Ethiopian service to Addis Ababa, Ethiopian now have a regularly scheduled service to Lome in Togo, which is pretty cool. And then finally here for the internationals, here we have this Lufthansa Airbus A340-600, and this aircraft is going to be heading out to Frankfurt in Germany. It's pretty cool to see the A340s back. Lufthansa were operating the Dash 600 pretty recently to Washington Dulles, so I wanted to add this aircraft in before, of course, all the quad jets go from Lufthansa and we have to resort to using the 787s, the A350s, all of those sorts of aircraft on these routes instead. But next up here, taxiing out to the runway, here we have this United Boeing 737-800. He's going to be heading out to Fort Myers. Then next up here, just taxiing away from the runway, here we have this United Airbus A330. He's just arrived in from Mexico City in Mexico. And then here is a route we referenced earlier. Here we have the Air Canada Airbus A330-300. He's just arrived in from Toronto Pearson. As I said, Air Canada are using mainline aircraft summer seasonally to Toronto, so during the winter period we will get the CRJ-900, and then in the summer, unless they change this, we will be getting the A220-300. I actually flew this route back in 2022 from Toronto to Washington Dulles on board the A220, and it was a very, very nice ride. So yes, it's a pretty cool aircraft, and this A220 has just arrived in from Toronto. And then finally here at the cargo stands, here we have a UPS MD-11. Of course, the MD-11s are a bit rare here at Washington Dulles, but we do occasionally get them as opposed to the 767s that we usually get. But this MD-11 is going to be heading out to Louisville. And then finally here, for today's updates, here we have this FedEx Boeing 767-300. He's of course going to be heading out to Memphis. And that does conclude today's update of Washington Dulles International Airport. As I said, in the next update, we will be back to kind of time period set airport updates. So I look forward to doing some of them. But apart from that, I hope you enjoyed today's update. And apart from that, I want to thank you very much for watching today's video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.